Hola amigos, bien ok. Y saludos otra vez desde Medellín. Hoy primero estoy muy feliz que muchos de ustedes han disfrutado el último video. Yo espero que el tema de hoy también va a estar muy interesante para ustedes. Um, Hoy nosotros vamos a hablar con este tipo de preguntas que muchas veces es un poco confundir. How much? How many? How much? How many? So that's the theme for today. How much? How many? Um, Now, how is a very useful word. This is one of our key question words we use in English. And you're probably familiar with lots of these other examples I have here. These are kind of questions you hear all the time. How are you? ¿Cómo estás? How are you? How do you do? How do you do is quite a formal sort of way of saying hello, nice to meet you, but we would probably use that in a very formal kind of environment, like if you're at a, I don't know, like an ambassador's reception, something very formal. How do you do? It's like very nice to meet you. How's it going? Much more informal. It's like when you're talking to new friends, very casual. How's it going? How are things? Yeah. How can I help? A la orden. How can I help? This is you're going to hear pretty well every shop you enter. How can I help? First kind of thing you're going to come across. How come is an interesting one. How come is rather like how did it happen? It means basically the same thing. So someone's telling you something that's happened, and if you're not sure how could that be, you can say how come? Really, how did that happen? How come this thing's taken place? How did it happen? How does it work? Very good, yeah. How does it work? After some more explanation. How far? We're asking directions. How far is it to place? How was your day? Yeah. How was your day? And this one, very popular for us from England. How's the weather? Because in England it changes every 20 minutes. So it's a good question to start with. How's the weather? Okay, so you're probably fairly familiar with these. How is a very common question you're going to get a lot of. But the one that seems to confuse a lot of my students, so we're going to cover that specifically today, is how much and how many. Which comes down to questions of deciding whether we're talking about money or whether it's just something we need to count. We need to know a quantity. And this counting can be where we get confusing because we can look at quantity in two ways. We can look at quantity as in a number of objects, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kind of thing, or we can look at an amount of something in the sense of a unit, like kilos of. And this is where I think it gets a bit confusing. So let's see if we can clear that up. So remember, we're looking at things to do with quantities, amounts of things, maybe units of measures, how we measure things, money, so the number of units involved or how we're calculating that, and whether we're looking at objects, singular things. So let's look at how much. How much. Now how much, really, we're looking at money, cost. So I can ask you a question like, how much is that car? So I can see the car, so it's an object. I could count it, there's only one of them, that car. How much is that car? So I'm asking, how much money does it cost? What's its value? So that's fairly clear, right? Well, let's try this next one. So I'm in the supermarket and I've gone to buy bananas. Okay, so I go in the shop, I ask the assistant, how much are the bananas? How much are the bananas? Because I want to know how much money I need to buy them. How much are the bananas? Now, bananas are countable. You could count them individually, singular objects. I know they bunch up, you buy them as bunches, but you can buy them individually, so they are countable. But as we know, in the supermarket, they're not always necessarily sold individually. They're sold by weight. They're sold in a unit of measure, like a kilo. So you might get a different answer. If you ask how much are the bananas, it doesn't mean you want to buy all of the bananas he's got. He might have hundreds of bananas, unless you really like bananas. So you're probably going to answer something like, well, they're so many pounds or so many pesos a kilo. What you're being told is the unit of measure, the unit is how much they cost per kilo. And that's the answer you're getting back. So an easier answer is, how much are a kilo of bananas? How much are a kilo of bananas? So now we're using a unit of measure, which we can still count because it's how many kilos, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kilos perhaps. How much per kilo? And then we get our price. So, okay, you could count the bananas, but often we use this. We use a different unit, a unit of measure rather. So we're not counting individual bananas. We're counting them as kilo groups. Yes, it's so much a kilo. But let's look at something else which is called, let's say, an uncountable noun. So it's an object that you can't count. Something like water. Water. You can't count it. You can't point to say there's one water. You have to give it a unit. It's a litre of water. It's an ocean of you have to give it a unit first. So let's go back to our supermarket. So we bought bananas. Let's say we want to buy some cheese at the delicatessen. Now, cheese is effectively an uncountable noun. It's like cheese, milk, meat, butter. On its own, it's just a thing. It's a material. It's cheese. It could be 1 packet of cheese. It could be 100 kilos of cheese. We need to give it a unit before we can count it. So we would say something like, how much is the cheese? And the answer we're going to get is, it's so many pounds, so many pesos per kilo, because they're going to give us a unit first. So we have to have a unit before we can give the value, because you can't count it. Once we put a unit on it, then we can ask a question like, how much is a kilo of cheese? Easy. Now we know it's a kilo, or a gram, if you want to do it. Yeah. So for uncountable objects like water, milk, meat, butter, cheese, bread even, it's just the thing. It's the material. Now you can sell it in packets, kilos, tons of it if you like, but you have to give it a unit first. Other things automatically come as a unit, like a banana is one thing, you can count it. An orange, one thing, you can count it. Orange juice, however, you can't count unless you give it a new unit. It's a litre, 2 litres, things like that. That's where I think the confusion comes. Let's look at this other way of looking at it. So we've said, how much is that car? How much is that car? We can see it's one car, and we're asking the price of that. How much? How much does it cost? Now maybe we want to make more of a selection, so we can ask him, how many cars do you have here? So in the whole of the showroom where he has all the cars, we'll say, how many cars do you have here? Because you can count them. They're individual objects. You can see literally the separation of them from other things. How many cars have you got? Easy. Yeah? How many? How many bananas are there in this bag? Well, they're countable. You could count them. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah? So how can we turn something that's not countable, like cheese, into a countable thing? We have to give it a unit. So we can either give it a kilo, something like that, because that's an obvious kind of like, do it by weight. So how many kilos of cheese are there in this packet? Yeah. Or we can use a different word to describe something, which basically makes it a unit. And this word we would use is type. So type is something that we can distinguish one thing from another. So we have different types of flowers, let's say, in the garden. There are lots of different types of flowers. They're all flowers, but they're different types. Different types of cars. I mean, you know, that car's different from that one. Different types of cheese. Now, you know this if you're at the delicatessen. You say, do you have any cheese? You say, yeah, I've got lots, look. All of these to choose from. So each of them is cheese, because the ingredients are basically the same, but they are slightly different. And each difference makes it a different type. So we can say, how many types of cheese do you sell here? And now he can count them for you. See how we do it? So we can make it a countable thing because we can ask for it as a particular type of that object. Yeah. Otherwise, we have to give it a unit so we can count the units. So we talk about water. We have to basically give it how many litres of water do you have, because now we can count the litres, not the water, because the water itself isn't countable. So that makes more sense. So remember, first of all, we have to look at, can you count it? Is what we're talking about an object you can actually physically count? If that's the case, we need to use how many, because we're looking at numbers, how many. How much we're looking really just at money, monetary value. How much does it cost? For how many, we're counting really the either individual objects or possibly the units. How many kilograms, how many kilometers, how many meters, how many seconds. We're giving it a unit. So that's really the difference. There we go. I think that's enough time on that for today. So I hope you found that helpful. Déjame saber en los comentarios. Let me know in the comments. And I'll see you for the next one. Cheerio for now.